This video shows a dark, jagged silhouette drifting against the bright curve of the Earth. It sits in a high polar orbit, a trajectory that requires immense energy and is typically reserved for heavy surveillance equipment. NASA officially classifies this specific shape as ordinary space junk, but across thousands of internet forums and viral threads, a massive online community insists it is an autonomous alien sentinel. According to the lore, this object has maintained its silent vigil over our planet for 13,000 years, establishing an orbit long before human civilization even formed its first cities. A single piece of modern orbital debris somehow became tangled with ancient star maps, mid-century geopolitical paranoia, and the early experiments of pioneer inventors. Tracing the evidence reveals a mosaic of completely separate historical anomalies, stitched together over a century by human anxiety. The origin of this timeline dates back to 1899. Operating from his Colorado Springs laboratory, Nikola Tesla reported intercepting a series of strange, rhythmic radio signals he believed were coming from another world. Decades later, in the 1920s, amateur radio operators documented a different anomaly. They transmitted signals out into the atmosphere, only to hear their exact transmissions return to them several seconds later. This animated diagram shows the mechanics behind those long-delayed echoes. Rather than traveling out into the void, the radio waves hit the upper ionosphere, which can reflect and delay their return to the surface. Other natural sources, like radio bursts from Jupiter, create the rhythmic interference Tesla likely encountered. Because early 20th century scientists lacked a complete map of atmospheric reflection or planetary radio noise, these rhythmic returns were interpreted as structured, intelligent broadcasts. These early contacts were actually humanity's first encounters with the complex radio environment of our own solar system, ranging from the natural bursts of distant planets to the delayed echoes of our own atmospheric reflections. By the 1950s, the mystery shifted from radio to radar. Years before the first successful satellite launches, newspapers began reporting that military installations were tracking unidentified objects circling the Earth. Retired Marine Corps Major Donald Kehoe publicly claimed the U.S. Air Force was actively tracking two dark satellites. He pointed out that neither the United States nor the Soviet Union possessed the rocket technology to put them there. The source of these radar pings was terrestrial. The military was tracking the launch of the United States' own secret spy programs, alongside scattered, unannounced debris from early Soviet orbital tests. What the public perceived as impossible surveillance craft were actually the closely guarded remnants of two superpowers locked in an arms race. The myth gained its 13,000-year timeline in 1973. A Scottish researcher mapped out the 1920s radio echoes. He claimed the data formed a star chart pointing to the ancient Epsilon Boötes constellation. This century of disjointed theories finally found a physical host in 1998. During the STS-88 mission to a Somali International Space Station, astronauts photographed a dark, angular object drifting in low Earth orbit. NASA cataloged the object immediately. The mass is a standard trunnion pin acquisition device thermal blanket. It slipped away from the crew during a spacewalk and drifted off into the vacuum. This 3D model demonstrates extreme optical conditions in orbit. Without atmospheric diffusion, sunlight hits objects with a stark, unidirectional glare. When a flat, silver blanket tumbles through this environment, its folds cast absolute black shadows. Rotating the model to a precise angle, the flat profile disappears into shadow, creating the optical illusion of a solid, metallic hull. When this specific physical evidence is placed under forensic scrutiny, the image of an alien sentinel dissolves into a lost piece of human insulation. The black night is a thermal blanket, wrapped in naturally reflecting radio waves and amplified by mid-century geopolitical anxiety. Yet, despite overwhelming scientific documentation, millions of people continue to share the photograph and debate its origins today. Psychologists point to pareidolia, our brain's hardwired tendency to find faces, shapes, and meaning in random data. When confronted with formless static or meaningless debris, the human mind actively constructs a narrative to make sense of the noise. We build these stories because the alternative is much harder to process. The idea that we are completely alone in a silent, indifferent vacuum is a difficult reality. The Black Knight satellite does not exist, but the myth survives because it serves a purpose. It represents our enduring hope that somewhere out there in that vast darkness, something ancient is actually looking back.
Welcome to the Myth Story channel. Like, comment, and share, and be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more.